everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be going over the 3 best one tricks for each role. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream. It's on YouTube every night, starting around midnight Eastern Standard Time. Usually go till about 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. Then we have all sorts of guides like this on the channel as well. How to macro better, how to micro better, what is dodging, when should you dodge, how to deal with toxicity, and all sorts of other content as well. We do new tier lists and patch notes for every patch as well, and we have a playlist of over 200 coaching sessions and just endless content on the channel, so be sure to check all that out if you enjoy this. Okay, so let's go ahead and get in here, and I'm going to try to do this a little bit faster than some of my other videos, which is always a meme on the channel. I've been trying to do it for years, but let's see if we can actually do it. So I've narrowed it down to 3. I had tried to cover like somewhere between 6 to 10 for each role in the past one trick videos that I've done, and that's just way too much to try to cover in like a 20 to 30 minute video. So we're gonna go through this pretty quickly, but I just real quick at the start, I just want to talk about why should you one trick in general, at least consider doing it, and then what are the good qualities of a one trick, and then we'll go into the top 3 for each role. So why one trick in general? Well, it's pretty simple. The more that you do something, usually the better you are at it, and the more you understand about it. So it's the same thing for why doctors specialize, in neurosurgery or, rehabilitation or the endocrine system or all this other stuff. If someone's really good at something, they specialize most of the time, right? Just because you're going to be so much more familiar with all of the different situations you could encounter, especially when there's so many variables like there are in League of Legends, right? You have to be thinking about what to build, which runes, how do you match up with all the other 150 something champions in the game, right? There's so many different things that you have to constantly adjust and keep track of, and all of it changes at least a little bit every 2 weeks. So when you play the same champion all the time, then you're going to know your side of the equation, right? You're going to know exactly when you should go all in, you're going to know when you should run, you're going to be able to track the jungler better because you're going to be able to pay attention to the mini-maps. You're not focusing as much on your own movements and skill shots because it's just going to become second nature. So that's really what it comes down to. The more you do something, the more you're going to know, the more you're going to understand what you should do in different situations, and the more you're going to be able to pay attention to macro because you don't have to pay attention to micro as much. So what are some of the qualities of good one tricks? Well, there's a few here that I'll mention. There are several other you could think of, but some of these should be pretty obvious and some of these are not so obvious. So number 1, you need to think about the presence of a champion. What presence is how much is it picked and how much is it banned? Because if it's picked and banned all the time, that means you don't get to play it, right? So you ideally want to try to find something that's relatively undercover. I mean, most really good one tricks have been discovered and they're pretty well known by a lot of the community, but occasionally there are some that can sneak in there. But in general, you want to try to get to less than a 25% presence in solo queues. That means it's not picked or banned 75% of the time, which means you're going to get to play it a lot. Because once again, if you're a one trick, you want to play the champion all the time. Because you're going to be at a big disadvantage if you don't play that champion, right? Because you're not going to be as diversified. You're not going to know as much about other champions or other roles, which is kind of the trade-off of one tricking. You also want less than a 75% pro presence. And the main reason for this is if something is showing up everywhere in pro all the time, that means it's most likely going to get nerfed, right? So the cutoff point that they've stated in the past is about 80%, but I'd look at about 75% just to be safe. Because if you're in it for the long haul, if you're just not thinking about a couple of patches, if you want to put the time in to learn some of these champions, and many of them are very difficult to master, they're very gated by your practice, you need to have played them a lot to be good on them, then you don't want something to just get nerfed out in a month after you just dropped 50 games on it trying to learn it, right? So you want something that's not that popular in pro and is relatively unpopular in solo queue. Okay. A new stat that I added this time to look at is greater than a 7% delta. Now, we're not going to see that all the time. But over here, you can see the delta is this number. And that's basically, I'm using Lolalytics. People ask me all the time, where do I get some of these stats about the different champions? I think it's a great resource. Go check it out. I'm not sponsored or anything. I just use their website a lot. It's useful. But the delta is basically the difference between somebody who one tricks a champion or who plays it a ton and your average player. So, for example, Caitlyn, someone who plays it a lot, is going to win about 60% of the time versus an average player is going to win 51.5%. So the delta is 8.2, which means that the more time you put in, you can expect your win rate to go up about 8% if you do as well as a lot of the other one tricks do that are sort of at the top end. So you want something with a high delta because that means that you're going to be rewarded for playing the champion a lot. Now, those are just broad statistics. Some people can completely dominate when they learn a lot with champions with a low delta. But a high delta usually is kind of a little signal that if you play that champion a lot, you can dramatically improve your win rate. So think about that as sort of a really rough way of understanding the difficulty of a champion. Always got to put that in quotes, but the relative difficulty of a champion for the average player base versus the specialists. Okay, you also obviously want something that's going to be really OP, that's really strong. So I try to define that in 3 different ways. It has resilience, so it either has some kind of, armor or magic resist, shields, regeneration, outplay potential that can block a lot of damage, just something that makes them difficult to kill. Then you have damage, how much damage do they put out? Then you have mobility, so, how much can they get away from ganks, how much can they rotate, how much can they dodge skill shots, and how much outplay potential do they have? And then another one that I didn't list here, but that's kind of English, or that's kind of important to think about, is utility. So what do they bring to the team? Do they have a lot of CC? Do they have a lot of engage? I guess I could put utility on here too. CC, engage, other sorts of useful things for your team, such as like a Morgana Black Shield, for example. So utility could be one also to think about in there. But yeah, do they do these 4 things? And usually the best ones will do at least 2 of them, and some of the greatest ones will do 3 or maybe even 4 of them. Proficient in many metas, so if you're playing something over the long haul, you want something that's not only going to be good for maybe 1 or 2 patches, but is going to be good for an entire season potentially, or half a season. So this means that if tanks are in the meta, or assassins are in the meta, or marksmen are really strong, or mages are strong, engage supports, tank supports, enchanters, they're going to be able to thrive in almost any meta because they have a versatile play style. So we'll talk about here, they can snowball when they're ahead, they can come back when they're behind, they can flex to multiple positions potentially, they have multiple win conditions, so they can split push, take objectives quickly, team fight, farm really efficiently, just all sorts of different things they can do in different ways they can win the game. And usually that comes in with versatile itemization as well. So oftentimes they either use items that are very unlikely to get nerfed, or they're using items where if it does get nerfed, then they have backup options. So, someone like Kai'Sa historically is a champion that's like this for the ADC role, right? Where right now she uses Manamune and Gensu's, but in the past she's used Stormrazor. She's even gone for some AP builds, including things like Zanya's or Death Caps, Nashor's Tooth. And there's all sorts of things that she's been able to build in the past to adapt to different nerfs to her and to different changes in the meta. Varus is another one, right? He can have the lethality, sort of Legolas build, the poke build, or he can go for the on-hit build. He can even go for a crit build as well. So any champion that is versatile, it's going to be a lot less likely that they're nerfed out, and it's a lot more likely that they're going to be good in a bunch of different metas. Then the final one that I'll mention is very limited counterplay, I think is important. So if you're going to be playing this all the time, that means you're going to be picking it out of position. You're going to be playing it into potential counter matchups. So it doesn't mean that you hard win every matchup, but it means that you have the potential to at least neutralize bad matchups. So you have a lot of outplay potential just in case you get counterpicked, or other stuff you can do, right? Maybe you can roam really well. Maybe you scale really well. So if you go behind in CS, or you have to, give up a couple of plates early, something like that, you can come back into the game later. GP is a great example of this, and this is why he's played in pro a lot of the time, is because you can put him on weak side where he's not going to get a lot of jungle help, and even if he has a bad matchup, he can still farm his way into the game, have a lot of utility, and scale better for later. So anyways, those are good qualities of One Tricks. Let's go ahead and move on to the top lane. So I've got Riven, Akali, and Irelia. And once again, there are a whole bunch of different champions that can fit into these roles. I'm just listing 3 just for the sake of time, because I want to try to get through as many as I can in 20 to 30 minutes so I don't scare off people with those hour-long videos anymore. So let me know in the comments if there's something else that you really like in the top lane or jungle or mid. And I'd like to start a conversation about it. I think it'd be really fun to see what you guys have had a lot of success with. But anyways, let's talk about Riven here just really quickly. So Riven is sort of one of the classic champions that does very well if you put a lot of time into her. She's very difficult to play. She has a lot of animation cancels. And there's a huge difference between whether you do your fast combo or kind of a slower version of the combo. And then you have lots of choices like when to use your stun, when to use your shield, how to position and play around your cooldowns. So one of the hardest champs in the game to master, one of the great montage champs out there, and she's just really versatile as well. She can almost always find her way into any meta, and she can navigate most matchups really well if you're good on her. If you hit those combos, if you time that stun correctly and the shield correctly, you can scale really well. So right now, as of patch 10.18, a lot of people are going Cleaver into Death's Dance on her, but in the past, she's gone lethality, like a Ghostblade, Dustblade kind of build. She's gone for a faster lifesteal item, like Bloodthirster. So there's a lot of different kind of AD scaling utility items that are good on her. She's gone Sterex in the past. You don't want to get attack speed items like Blazer and King and stuff like that on her too much, because most of her damage comes from her Q, and you will weave auto attacks in there, but you really just kind of want that survivability, lifesteal, and heavy AD scaling, just because she has great ratios on her damage, and her shield also scales with AD. So yeah, she's just going Cleaver, Death's Dance, and right now she's going Conquer. That's what she has usually gone in the past since kind of the new runes came out. But in theory, she could go for some other stuff. I could see her, if Conquer gets nerfed out, she could go Fleet, she could go Press the Attack. There might even be a world where she could go something like Electrocute, right? So there's a lot of different things that she could do out there. And just heavy mobility, heavy outplay potential, really good scaling, great potential to bully people or catch them off guard. With a lot of damage and snowball early on. Really solid at team fights too, because a lot of her major damage is AoE. Her Q is AoE. Her stun is AoE. Her ult's AoE. So she can just completely delete everybody in a team fight as well if people are grouped up or they get like hard CC'd, by something like an Amumu or a Jarvan ult or something like that. So very good team fight, good split pushing, good 1v1 outplay potential. And you get very heavily rewarded for mastering this champ and learning what to do in different situations. Very rarely picked or banned, especially for one of these highlight reel type of champions. She's only got a 5% presence, and she has a 6.3 delta, which is kind of surprising. Like, I would think her delta would be like a 10 or something like that, but one thing when you're thinking about delta is that the vast majority of people that are playing Riven are already one tricks. So there are not random people picking this champion up. It's people that are in it for the long haul most of the time with Riven. So that does bring down the delta just a little bit, versus if it's something that, sometimes people dabble in that aren't very good and they drag down that win rate, you can get a much higher delta. So that's why someone like Caitlyn will have like a 10 delta, because she's so popular. Everyone's playing her right now, and a lot of people don't play her that well, so they drag down that delta from the one tricks. But nevertheless, pretty good to look at, very hard to learn, very rewarding if you do learn her though. And has almost no pro presence. That's another good perk. Akali's another one. You got to be a little careful with Akali, just because if she is good, she does get a lot of pro presence. She gets complained about constantly by pro commentators and people in Challenger. She's good. So, she is kind of nerfed and buffed around pro. She does have a 10 delta, so she is very difficult to learn. And she's somewhat versatile as well. You do have to get the Gunblade early, but there are lots of other items you can get after that. So sometimes people go Zhonya's. Liandry seems to kind of be a flavor of the week. Deathcap is extremely good on her. Now, I will say, and you will see this with a lot of champions that we're going to talk about, Hourglass is largely a trap item for the vast majority of the community. It does give you a lot of outplay potential. You can Zhonya's and get away from, Zed ults, Jinx ults, just all sorts of other nasty things out there. So it feels good. It's like, okay, sweet, I got this outplay potential. It's got some armor on it. But the problem is it really slows down your ability to snowball, because it really doesn't have that much damage. It's got 75 AP on it, but it doesn't do anything else, right? It doesn't have spell pin on it. It doesn't just have it doesn't have the kind of double damage stacking of Liandry's, right? Where you have the Madness buff and you have the Torment percentage damage. So it's a relatively low damage item, and it's not that cheap, right? It's 2,900 gold, and you could instead basically have a Morellonomicon or a Liandry's for that price, which are both going to have more AP, and they have extra modifiers, right? You have Morellonomicon, gives you the 15 pin, and then Liandry's Torment gives you that, it gives you the Torment and the Madness buff. So they're going to put up a lot more damage. It's like, yeah, you do have the 45 armor, but these also are going to have 300 health, which is pretty close. I mean, 45 armor is going to be something like 900 gold in value. And then the health right here is going to be probably about the same, about 900 gold in value. So they have about the same defensive stuff on them. This does have CDR, these don't, but it's just really not giving you that much extra defense outside of the active, and these just put up way more damage. So with a lot of the champions that typically get Zhonya's, it usually lowers their win rate significantly. So if you look at a second item here, if you get a Zhonya's second on Akali, then you're lowering your win rate by 4 to 6%, even 13% in the case of Deathcap. So by far the best thing that you could be rushing is Deathcap as your second item. Now, that's usually only if you're super rich, if you have a ton of gold, because it is a bit more expensive. But it just goes to show that you just want the damage, right? You want to snowball, you want to evaporate people if you're playing assassins, like an Akali, you know, a Riven, and champions like that. You just want them to die, right? Sometimes the best offense is the best defense. And I think that people just get tricked by Zhonya's because it's so cool, because you can make such outplay potential. If you rush Zhonya's, it's a 43% win rate. Now, I will point out that Leandri's rush is also a 64% win rate, but you have to keep in mind that's an extremely low sample size. It's only 45 people doing that, so that's just kind of like one trick's goofing around, having some fun probably. So Gunblade is still where you want to start most of the time, but there's a pretty good representation of these other ones, right? There's 20,000 get Zhonya second, but you still have 17,000 getting Morellonomicon, and then 12,000 getting Leandri's. That's a pretty good representative size. So basically, don't get Leandri's, but don't get Zhonya's as a second item, maybe as a third or a fourth item. Once you're already overkilling people and you can use that utility a little bit better, it's not going to slow you down. So, really mobile, can snowball really fast, very difficult to counterplay her if you play her correctly with her smoke, using her ults to get that mobility, playing around your energy, learning how long you have to wait until you, finish up the rest of your combo, get enough energy for your Q. So she does take a lot to learn, but she's very strong and very rewarding if you do learn her. And Irelia is the last one that I'll mention here, and then we'll move on and try to get through these as fast as we can. And I think she's just one of the best bruisers top lane that's just historically pretty solid. Even when she's been nerfed a lot, if you're really good on her, you can make her work. So right now she's only got a 47% win rate. She does have an 8 delta though, so you do get rewarded very heavily for playing her. And she just meets a lot of these criteria, right? Right now in Pro, she's getting played some, but not a ton. She has a pretty low play rate in solo queue right now. Right, she's only got a 15% presence in solo queue, so she meets those criteria. She's got over that 7 delta, which is good. She's got the ability to have resilience and damage and mobility, and she's got a little bit of utility with her ult in team fights. So all of that's really solid. And then she just can get a whole bunch of different items. Right now she's getting Blatherin, King, and Wits End and kind of these on-hit builds. But in the past, she's done like Trinity into Sterix. She can get a Death Stance earlier if you want that. She can get Cleaver instead of Trinity. There's a lot of different items that you can get on her and be really effective. And she's just, got that outplay potential. You have the stun. You have the ability to block a ton of their damage with your W. She's got a lot of mobility, especially around the minions. So she's got a lot going for her. Great abuser of Conquer, but in theory, you could use Press the Attack if Conquer ever gets nerfed. So she's just got a lot of qualities. Got the mobility, the damage, the survivability, good team fight utility, 1v1 outplay potential. She's just kind of almost everything you would want in a bruiser type of champion. So are there other people that can beat her that are better bruisers right now in the meta? Probably. There's some other stuff out there that could be good, but I think that she's a good one to try to master in the long haul. You do have a little bit of threat from pro play, right? Where if she is really good, if they do give her a couple of buffs, or people figure out a new build, or they buff one of her key items, she might spike in pro play and then get nerfed back out. But I think that overall she's a pretty good pick in the long haul. Another one that I could mention that I think is pretty good too, and you can also play Irelia in the mid lane, you can play Akali in the mid lane, maybe Riven, a little bit tougher, but the fact that they can flex to mid or top is also really useful. I think Wukong's worth mentioning too. I kind of ran out of room there, didn't have the 3 spot, and he is getting a lot of pro attention, but he does have one of the best team fight potentials if you really want that. He's got the armor shred from Black Cleaver on his ult, you have the armor crush with your Q, you have the knock up with your ult, you have multiple dashes, your clone can block things like hooks for people, they can intercept like Jinx rockets or Ash arrows. So I think there's a lot of really good stuff going on with Wukong as well. I just kind of had him down just a little bit lower because he can get outscaled. It is a bit harder to split push with him and sort of 1v1 if you're not like super far ahead of the enemy. And he is getting a lot of pro attention still right now, so he might get nerfed a bit more. But he's definitely worth considering if you do want someone who's a bit more team fight oriented. Then I think he could be good. Okay, for the junglers, I think Kha'Zix. Kha'Zix and Rengar are just kind of no-brainers. I think almost anyone who's talking about one tricks is going to mention those champions just because they have such tremendous snowball potential. They have really good outplay potential as well. Now, Kha'Zix is kind of, bumping up against the edge here, right? He's got a 24% play rate, so he is really popular. And it just feels like if assassins are ever good, he's going to be at the forefront of people's mind for assassins. So almost always goes for the warrior enchantment, and then usually lethality. Dustblade is great on him just because you can go invisible multiple times and get multiple procs of this. And then after that, you can kind of decide. Ghostblade gives you more mobility. I think Edge of Night is really good on a lot of assassins, though, because it just blocks a lot of the CC, and that's the main way that they get stopped, is they get chain CC'd and killed before they can assassinate anybody. So I think the changes to Edge of Night earlier in the season or near the end of last season, whenever they did that, makes that item very, very strong on him if you already have enough damage to delete people. But he can also go kind of a bruisery build, right? Like, this is an electrocute build, but I've seen some Kha'Zixes have success going like a Conqueror and then Black Cleaver Death Stance kind of build. If they have a lot of tanks, if you want to last longer in fights, that might be some potential. So he does have a lot of different items that you can get that could be potentially powerful on him. And he has the versatility of his evolutions as well. So the Q is obviously really good right now. It gives you a lot more isolation damage. But I've seen more and more Kha'Zixes evolving the Void Spike as well. That 90% slow for 2 seconds is a very big deal. It gives you more utility. It's almost like a semi-engage to help your team catch up. And it just allows you to kind of dance around and go in and out of combat with people and just wait on your Q cooldown. So if you're fighting another melee, you can go in, invisible, isolate Q walk back, W them, wait on your Q cooldown, and then go back in and just sort of weave in and out with that. So that's something that I've been seeing a lot more. And then, of course, if you are really far ahead, you can evolve the Leap as well to get multiple resets if you think you're going to be cleaning up people in team fights. And then the invisibility, getting one extra use of that invisibility can be pretty good too. So once again, he's adapted over time. He's changed in terms of his items, his runes, his evolution order. There's a lot of ways you can adjust your play if you're really good on Kha'Zix. And take single targets down, great duelist, great at taking objectives. Great at really getting to that backline and deleting, because that invisibility and jumping over a wall is very hard to play around just because control wards don't see it and sweepers still don't allow you to target him with auto attacks and things like that. So very frustrating to go against a Kha'Zix who's really good. Okay, Rengar's another one that shouldn't really surprise anybody in terms of one-tricking. He's notoriously one of the best one-tricks of all time in the jungle. He does only have a 7% presence, which is really good, and he's got an 8.2 delta. And kind of like Kha'Zix, there's just a lot of outplay potential and a lot of snowball potential with him as well. So typically he does start off with a Dust Blade just to get that burst damage, delete the target. Ghost Blade's really good on him in particular just so that you get more value out of your ult. You're able to run people down a lot more efficiently, stick to them, and make sure that you get that kill. Now, he doesn't actually get Warrior a lot of the time. As you can see, a lot of people just kind of skip Warrior and just go for Hunter's Machete and move on from there, just so you can get your Dust Blade and start snowballing faster. His passive obviously caters to snowballing. The more kills that you get, the more AD that you get, the more likely you're going to be able to keep getting those kills. And I'm not a Rengar one-trick, but there's a surprising amount of complexity to his kit. I've tried that before. But kind of like Kha'Zix, you can avoid, or you can adjust sort of your order in which you're using these abilities to be effective in a bunch of different situations. So obviously you can try to get a triple Q proc, which is going to be one of your biggest damage abilities if you charge it up. I don't remember exactly how you do it, but you do a Q, you charge it up, and then right before, as soon as you jump on somebody, you get that extra point, so you hit them with the Q right away. You get that reset when you do the Q again, and then you do an empowered Q, and you can get a triple Q on somebody, do a massive amount of burst damage. Or you can save some of it for an empowered Bola. If you're going to jump on him and do damage, and it's like an Ezreal, you know he's probably going to jump away before you can full-on one-shot him, then you can root him with the Bola. Or if you're going to be running someone down for an extended amount of time, you can throw 2 Bolas at him. That Battle Roar is really useful if you think you're going to get CC'd as well. Now, I'm not sure if that cleanses suppressions or not. Removes existing crowd control effects. I think it does. Well, you wouldn't be able to cast it if you were suppressed. But, like, I don't think. Once again, I'm not a specialist. But for example, if you jump in, Morgana's probably going to bind you, or something like that, then you can use that Empowered Ward to cleanse away that CC. So if you combine this with Edge of Night, you can get rid of 2 different pieces of CC. So it's very, very difficult to stop him when he jumps in. When he has that, he can cleanse off Ash arrows and things like that as well. So tons of damage, tons of outplay potential. with his bush mechanic as well, you can really get the jump on people, especially if you're invading the enemy jungle. If you get ahead and just really run him down, and it makes it extremely difficult to get away from him, and he just does a ton of damage. So Rengar, super good, difficult to play just because, once again, you have to decide the order that you're going to do these things. He does have some auto attack resets with his Q and some nuances with the bush and stacking up your ferocity in different situations. So you really got to get used to him. But he can be really good. And once again, kind of like Kha'Zix, you know, he's taking Electrocute right now, but in the past, he's taken Dark Harvest. He can take Conqueror. In theory, I guess he could probably take PTA if they ever nerfed Conqueror and you wanted a little bit more burst if they nerfed Electrocute. So there's just a lot of different things he can get. So he can go for kind of the Bruisery build if he wants to, but most of the time he's probably going to go for the Lethality. Okay. And then the last one that I'll mention on here, probably not much of a surprise, is going to be Lee Sin. Now, Lee is a little bit more controversial, and this is partially because there are so many bad Lee Sins out there because he is balanced around pro play. Does have an 8.4 delta, but he's right on the cusp here of, you know, being less than a 25% presence in solo queue. So he is definitely a major risk if you learn him that he could get nerfed out because of pro. But he's really versatile, kind of like a lot of the other champions where you can go very aggressive early and snowball really hard. You can get that warrior, and then if you're really far ahead, I've even seen Lees get some lethality before, so get something like a Dustblade or a Ghostblade potentially. But the more common build is going something like Black Cleaver and then into a sort of Bruiser type of build where you would get something like a Sterex after that, or a Death Stance, or a GA. And yeah, it's just a ton of outplay potential. Once again, like a lot of the other champions, Lee is probably one of the most complex champions in the game because he has so much mobility. And so it's so much of a cat and mouse game with the enemy. Are you going to take your Q or not? You can dodge stuff by ward hopping, right? If they're throwing a piece of CC at you, like an Ash Arrow, and you're really good on him, you could ward hop to the side to dodge it and then Q and hit him and go over there and flash behind him and kick him back into your team. So there's just so many different combinations of ways you can use your abilities to both evade the enemy and to also sort of maneuver your way around him to get a really good kick or to stick to him over time. And, you know, once again, there's just so many nuances to what you can do with him. So he clears pretty well. Once again, he has damage builds. He has tanky builds. Later on, he does have very good utility. If you do get off the kick of Destiny, you can, you know, almost single-handedly win the fight for your team. He can do a ton of burst damage. He can have a lot of survivability. So he's kind of on the radar. You know, he's on the balancing hit list a lot of the time just because he does get a lot of pro presence when he is really good. But if you are super proficient on him, you definitely can climb. You definitely can smurf. And he's really fun. He's really interesting to try to master. So I think that he's going to be potentially a really good choice as well. But, you know, as with all three of these, as well as the top lane, you know, while you're learning them, be prepared to lose a lot of games, right? Because they're all very difficult. And that's the thing about one tricks, right? Is you get rewarded for mastering them. But there's a huge sort of gate there that you have to be able to climb over to do well on them. And that's why a lot of people do not do well. And that's why a lot of these one tricks, many of them will have under a 50% win rate just because they're so difficult and a lot of people just don't put in the time and effort to master them. And a last one that I'll mention here that I think is pretty good, and these are all AD, and it is very common that a lot of the best one-trick junglers are going to be AD. Some other ones that are AP, if you're looking for that. Shaco's another really good one that you definitely could mention, who does have an AP option and can be really strong. So you could do Shaco instead of Lee if you want to, or Evelyn is a little bit more meta-dependent, but she can be good. Nidalee's another one who is a bit more meta-dependent. She is very difficult. She does force you into sort of an early-game skirmishing playstyle. That she can be really good as well. So there are some other options out there in terms of AP, but I think that Shyvana is someone who's up and coming pretty good, especially if you're kind of the lower elo bracket, and is really underrated. Now her delta is not that high in theory, but she does have an AD option and an AP option, so she can power farm, she can split push, she can 1v1. She does take objectives super well, but she does also have that AP build if your team really needs that. Then just having that flexibility between different playstyles and different damage types is pretty rare among a lot of champions. So I think that she's definitely worth considering if you do want an AP champ sort of in your repertoire. That could be a good option. If you want tanks, you know, I think that Nunu can be really good as well. He's AP. He's about to get nerfed a little bit. Almost always very underrated. Although the number one jungler right now, Pansar Dragon, finally got to number one. He has been basically one-tricking Nunu, or playing him a lot at least. So that might get Nunu a lot of attention. So that is a good tank option. Sejuani's been nerfed a lot in the past, but she's decent. Zack's a decent tank option. Another AP that could be pretty good that's kind of going under the radar right now is Fiddlesticks. So that's something to look out for. But anyways, that's it for the jungle. Let's go into mid lane here real quick and keep going. So I think that mid is probably the most diverse role, and it almost always is. So there's a ton of different things you can do well on in the mid lane, and that's why a lot of people like mid, I think, because there is such a large diversity. There are so many different champions and so many different ways you can play the game, right? You can roam top, you can roam bottom, you can try to 1v1 people, you can play mages, you can play, tanks. There's just all sorts of different things that can be successful in mid. So I think that Katarina is one that I will put on here just because she kind of just checks all of the boxes, right? Very low presence, only 12% presence, pretty much never gets played in pro, goes under the radar, low ban rate most of the time, 7.8 delta, so difficult to play. Fairly versatile itemization, kind of like Akali. She does have to get that Gunblade. There's a very low chance that Gunblade gets nerfed just because so few champions use it and almost no pro champions use it most of the time, so it's very unlikely that Gunblade's going to get nerfed. And then after that, she has a bunch of different items. Sort of like Akali, Zhonya's is a trap item, right? So do not get Zhonya's on her if you want to, win, right? So it's much better as a third or fourth item once you already have enough damage to get those kills, but you need to be getting that damage. So some of the, the most powerful item, kind of like Akali too, is Death Cap. So if you're snowballing, if you have a couple of kills, and you can get around sort of that really weak power spike from the double Rod of the Aged, or needlessly large rod that can be really annoying to build. If you can just go ahead and grab rods, then Death Cap is going to be your biggest spike, right? It's 67% win rate versus a 51% win rate on Zhonya's. But if it's something a little more modest, if you do want something in the 3,000 gold range, similar to Zhonya's, there are a few good options. I think that Morellonomicon is great. And the reason that this is so popular a lot of the time, and why most people just copy the pros or like high-end one-tricks, but the reason that Morello is so strong is because you can get Oblivion Orb early on, which gives you that spell pin. So when you get the flat pin from Sork Boots and Oblivion Orb, it's so strong, and it's a very cheap mid-game power spike. Because a lot of champions will not have built a lot of magic resist by then. They're not going to have a lot of magic resist per level by then. And the lower someone's magic resist gets, the higher percentage damage that you're going to be doing off of spell pen. Just look up spell penetration, how it works on the League Wiki if you want to know. But basically, that's why spell pen is so good in the early game, and that's why so many people get Oblivion Orb. And if you already have Oblivion Orb, and I've worked out the math, I know LS will disagree with this a lot of the time, but you're kind of priced into getting Morellonomicon if they have any healing on their team. And there is a ton of stuff that heals that people don't even think about. Conquer does a lot of healing. Ravenous Hunter, Triumph, Death's Dance, Blade of the Red King, any sort of enchanters. So there's just a ton of stuff out there that people forget about. A lot of people think, oh, they don't have a Soraka or a Mundo on their team, therefore I don't need Grievous Wounds. But the reality is, a lot of times Grievous Wounds, even if it's only stopping something like Conquer and Death's Dance, can block a lot of damage, right? Especially in a team fight, especially on a champion that has a lot of AoE. Now, I will say, in terms of Katarina, she does already have a built-in Grievous Wounds with her ultimate. So, Morellonomicon, not as good on her as it is on someone like Akali, potentially, just because she already has the built-in, Grievous into her kit. But I'm just saying that is something that is kind of memed about and very heavily underrated on a lot of champions. So heavily consider getting a Morellonomicon on champions, especially ones that don't need mana items early. It can be really strong. So it's a pretty good item, but Death Cap's going to be really strong. And then you can get the Liandry's. Death's Dance might seem like a kind of weird one, but I actually like this build a lot, especially if they have a lot of CC on their team or they have some tanks and you think you're going to be in for a longer fight. Just because all of her damage abilities also scale with AD, so you're not really losing that much damage by getting Death's Dance. Then you get the armor, the magic resist, you get a lot of healing, and you get the damage delay, right? So when you combine this with something like Ravenous Hunter, with Hextech Gunblade, you can have something up to like 45% spell vamp in a sense, and you have delayed damage, so your spell vamp has more time to kick in. So it just makes you very, very difficult to pick off. So I'm a huge fan of Death's Dance if you can work that into your build, if you want something a bit more defensive. If you do just want the pure offense, Rabadon's Death Cap is going to be the best way to go. And if you just want to kind of piecemeal something that's pretty good, Liandry's is solid. Now, Liandry's does get a lot more value if you already have a lot of other CC on your team, because you don't want to be building Rylai's most of the time on her But if you have something like a Nautilus on your team, or a Nunu, or just something else that's going to be slowing people or applying CC for those team fights, then you get a lot more value out of Leandri. So just kind of pay attention to your team comp, see if other people are going to be getting slows. And if they are, then Leandri's can be a pretty good option early on as well. But yeah, just really good. Snowballs hard, does a lot of damage in team fights, can completely delete people if she gets ahead, so she can 1v1, she can team fight. Her objective control is pretty weak, doesn't take towers quickly, doesn't get Lich Bane, doesn't take Barons quickly. Her farm is like okay, but it's really just the ability to delete people and just deal an insane amount of damage in team fights, especially if they don't have a lot of CC. She's going to be super strong. So that's why I like Katarina, under the radar, hard farm, hard domination. Then you have Echo, and I think Echo in general is just someone who's just perennially really overrated. He can be played in multiple roles. He almost always has a positive, strong win rate. He's got a 6 delta, so he's pretty hard to learn. And a lot of, I guess not a ton of people play him, but he does have a 5% play rate. And so kind of the average people trying him out do drag it down, although most Echo players are going to be specialists. And he just does have a lot of abilities. He just is flexible is what I'm saying. In the way that he uses his abilities and his items and his runes. So right now Electrocute's pretty popular, but he can also go Dark Harvest. And as weird as it is, I could see a world where he would go something like Conquer. Usually you wouldn't want to do that. You want to do your damage up front. But if they do have a lot of tanks, he can benefit from something like that in theory. But yeah, usually an Electrocute user, and I think Electrocute's not that likely to get nerfed. It might be if Assassins get strong again. But he's going to be able to find something. And he just brings a lot to the table. He's got pretty good wave clear with his Q. He's got a really nice slow. He's very fast. He can outplay people really well with his E, so he can kind of dash around really well. He has a huge shield he can get off of his W. He can get a potential AoE 2-second stun off of his W. He can reset his health bar with his R and potentially do a massive amount of damage to somebody with that as well. So that allows him to tower dive early, get those kills, or just put himself in really dangerous situations to chase kills and secure them and still get back out with his R. So he just has a lot of different outplay potentials out there, and particularly against other assassins, because he does have the shield, he has the stun, he has the health reset. So against other things like a Zed, like a Katarina, like a Fizz, he can do very, very well into those matchups. And very similar to all these other champs we talked about, the Zanya's is a trap item early. You do not want to get this item early. Proto Belt, very, very good, right? It's got the 53% win rate. It's very cheap. You can get it early. It helps you wave clear. You can snowball. And that's what a lot of people do with them. Seems like more people have been shifting towards the Lich Bane early on, which is quite strong. Now, a big benefit of Lich Bane is not only does it allow you to do more burst damage, but it also allows you to take plates faster and take towers faster. So if you do get a kill, you can get a little bit of extra money, or if someone does kind of roam and sneak away from you and go to bot lane, you can punish them really hard by potentially pressuring their tower more. So it just gives you a little bit more versatility there. The movement speed is also very nice with him, just because he gets so many extra modifiers on the movement speed and he leverages it so well. So I think Lich Bane is very strong. I think Proto Belt's definitely very respectable if you want to get that. If you get Proto, you need to get it early, because that's really when it's at its strongest. Death Cap, of course, is going to be great. He has really high AP ratios, so that's fantastic. I will note that Spell Pen is not as good on him, so something like a Morellonomicon is not as good. It's still okay, but the thing is, like, he has AP scaling on his W with the shield that doesn't benefit from spell penetration, and he has, I think, pretty nice AP scaling on his ult as well, which doesn't benefit from penetration. So on a lot of champs that have like shields or other stuff that just want the raw AP, sometimes you don't want the pen because you're spending so much of your budget for the item on the penetration and not the raw AP. So you want to try to get the AP on him as much as possible, and that's why you see stuff like, Lich Bane, Proto Belt, Death Cap instead of Morellonomicon. So you still want the Sork boots. Those are obviously going to be your best choice in a lot of situations, but getting the Oblivion Orb, it's just going to have a bit less of an impact than it would on some of the other champions on the list. So yeah, very good, very flexible, can even be played top lane, jungle. Sometimes people even try him as a support. So really good champion overall, brings a lot of utility to the table. And then the last one that I'll mention is Yasuo here, and we'll make sure that we keep trucking. Now, Yasuo is probably one of the more controversial ones that I'll have on this list, and the main reason for that is he's almost always banned a lot, so he does have a 44% presence, so you're not going to get to play him a ton, which is a problem, you know, in solo queue. Like I mentioned before, if you one-trick something, you want to actually be able to play that champion a lot, so you are kind of in the danger zone, having, you know, well above that 25% solo queue presence. He doesn't get played in pro that much, so you do have that going for you. But a lot of people just hate this champion. They hate the win wall, so he is going to get banned a lot, and he gets complained about a lot constantly. So if Riot ever, you know, listens to all the haters, he could get another nerf. I think that's unlikely unless Critical Strike gets directly nerfed, because his win rate's not that high. It's 49%. There's just so much hatred for this champion out there in the community for non-Yasuo players that's always just a risk that you have to face. Is he is definitely on the radar. He has a bullseye on him. Most of the time in terms of balance and just people, you know, hating on him all the time. But he is very versatile. He's extremely difficult to play, but you have a ton of mobility, moving around the wave, being able to outplay different things. You do have your win wall to outplay, you know, a lot of different CC, a lot of different range champions. You have the ability to gap close and outplay people with your knockup. You do a ton of damage with your Q, with your crits. He can get some utility in there. I've seen him occasionally get a Wit's End or a Blade the Ruined King early. Now, I'm not a Yasuo one-trick, so I don't know when you would do those items, but I have seen people be very successful on that, although Critical Strike is still going to be the standard. Phantom Dancer, Infinity Edge, once you get those items, he just does a ton of damage. And after that, you can start getting utility. Death's Dance is very good. Bloodthirster's pretty popular, or GA. Right now, he does do Fleet just to help him out a bit early on, but you can also do Conquer pretty comfortably. You can even do Press the Attack. Your Q does trigger on hit, so it will help you trigger Press the Attack a lot better. So even if they nerf out Conquer or Fleet's really unlikely to get nerfed. But even if something changes about the meta, he's going to be able to find a rune. Does very heavy sustain damage, can do very heavy burst damage, takes objectives quickly, towers quickly. So he has all of that going for him. He is a little bit on the dangerous side. If you do get ganked and you don't keep track of the jungler and you're out of position, you are probably going to die unless you can outplay him 1v2, which is possible if you are ahead. But extremely difficult to play, extremely difficult to leverage his kit. And if you don't have a minion wave around, he really doesn't have a lot of mobility, right? He doesn't have any speed ups. He can't naturally jump over walls or anything like that, like a Riven. So it is a bit more dangerous. You do have to be very, very careful with your macro. Make sure you don't get caught out. So that does limit his split push potential a little bit, just because he does have to be more cautious. And that does limit your ability to potentially pressure and get early kills if you're not able to track the jungler, right? If you don't have good vision, if they decide to camp you, you are someone who can get punished really hard, just because, once again, you have very limited mobility. But I do think he is worth the risk. If you can get really good on him, he can be strong. He can be flex top lane. Even in the bot lane, he's okay with certain compositions, especially if they don't go double ranged bottom. Or I guess I don't even know what would be worse against him. I guess something like a Nautilus or a Leona plus a Draven would be really bad news. But if you think you're going to be able to get away with it, or you have a really aggressive support that can help you secure some kills early, he can even work in the bottom lane. So very versatile, very strong if you're good with him. You could substitute Yone as well. I think Yone is a little bit less proven. He can be very good. Similarly, he can get flexed into multiple lanes. But I just think that Yasuo, with that win wall outplay potential, is probably a little bit stronger. Yone right now is banned a lot more, so we'll see. He just came out. He is in the spotlight a lot, so we'll see how that shakes out over the next few months. But you could substitute in Yone if you prefer Yone. They build very similar items. I think Yone, maybe has a little bit more defense with the shield that he can bring up more often. I think it's his W can potentially be his shield, and he does have that mixed damage built in as well, with the magic damage plus the physical damage that he does. That does help out a little bit if they're stacking armor. So I'm not really sure which one would be better sort of in the abstract, but both of them are a very similar style of champion, and they can be very effective if you want sort of a high risk, high reward, hyper carry 1v9 champion, which is usually what you want when you're trying to one trick. Then they can be good. Okay, last few here, and I gotta try to get this done in under an hour, so we're gonna keep rolling. You're talking bot lane. I think Draven is almost always at the forefront of people's mind when you think about, one trick, what's strong in solo queue. Because because Draven is really unique in that he's very, very strong in the early game, which is rare for AD carries. There are some AD carries that can do some things in the early game, but Draven can almost 1v2 the lane by himself. He does a ton of damage, like super early, because of his axes. He basically comes to lane with a free BF sword. So if you can put that to work, if you get some really good poke in, or you have a very aggressive support, or the jungler comes down and ganks for you, you can snowball so hard, especially with your passive giving you that extra gold and just how much power he gets from even a single item. Usually Infinity Edge or Bloodthirster are going to be his best options. He can do super well. So yeah, ton of damage, versatile itemization. He can build crit. He can build lifesteal with Bloodthirster. He can build Ghostblade. Some people are even building Mana Mune on him. And I'll talk about that really quickly. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole. People who watch the stream know I'm not a huge fan of that item in general. But I will just touch on sort of why you need to be careful getting Mana Mune on champions like Draven and some of the other champs that have just be kind of in vogue with that item lately and sort of what that means. So Infinity Edge is going to be the best item overall on him. So it's kind of like the death cap theory, right? If you can just get a lot of damage, that's usually the best thing if you're going for a hard carry champion. So Infinity Edge is going to be the strongest item. It is going to give you a really high win rate. Bloodthirster is the most common item, and the way that this works when you're thinking about crit versus lifesteal on Draven is that his axes, the bonus damage from the axe does not get any benefit from crit. So when you crit somebody with one of those axes, the base damage crits, but the bonus damage that you get on the axe does not crit. The heavy AD does work, that is good, but overall that bonus damage doesn't crit. So single item, it is really strong. You do have a high win rate with that, but there is kind of that feels bad that extra crit doesn't work with his passive. However, or with his axes, the bonus damage off the axe does apply lifesteal, and that's why lifesteal is so common on Draven, because you steal so much health because your axes do so much damage. So the bonus damage can apply lifesteal, but it does not benefit any from crit. So that's kind of why there's always this tension of why it's so weird that he's a champion that rushes Bloodthirster or Death's Dance. If you've ever wondered that, well, why does he rush that and Caitlyn doesn't rush that, or Tristana doesn't rush that? It's because of the special interaction with the axes with lifesteal. So you do have that going for you. This is what most top-end one-trick Dravens will get, is the Bloodthirster early, although as you can see, it does have a lower win rate than Mana Mune or Infinity Edge. Now, why Mana Mune? Why does this make sense on Draven? Well, people will do this because it's a super efficient item once it's stacked. It's almost like a Rod of the Ages. So once you have this fully transformed into Mirror Mana, it does apply a lot of extra on-hit damage, and it gets something like 75 AD or 70 AD. It's some pretty large number for a cheap price. For 2,400 gold, to get that much AD, in addition to getting the extra Mirror Mana on-hit damage, which is, I think it's 6% of your current mana. So if you have, with that build, somewhere around between 1,500 and 2,000 damage, it's going to be about 100 extra on-hit damage if you're at full mana when you start fighting people, which is obviously a ton of damage. So it is very, very good when it comes online. The problem is it takes 10 minutes, usually with like perfect usage, in order to get the full value out of that. Because if you don't have the 100 AD, then you're really losing a lot of value off of that, right? Because and when it's not stacked up, you get a lot less value as well. So before you have your Presence of Mind stacked, and before you have your Mirror Mana stacked up to where it has full mana value, early on it's only going to give you like maybe 35 or 40 AD. You don't really need the mana on Draven. He doesn't have like high mana cost abilities. Yeah, it'll let you spam your W, I guess, if you want to. But if you're catching axes, you don't have to pay mana to get those axes back up again, right? So you're really only getting like maybe 40 to 45 AD value, and that's about a BF sword. So you're basically paying double for a BF sword in terms of combat effectiveness in the early game, which is a real feels bad, right? When you're paying 2,400 gold for something that you could get for 1,300 gold with just a BF that also transitions into Infinity Edge and will help you snowball a lot earlier on. And that's what it really comes down to, is Draven is all about that early game snowball, right? You get a ton of extra gold from his passive. He can bully people tremendously if you just stack a lot more AD in the early game. And he falls off a bit later. And why does he fall off? Well, he doesn't have any AoE abilities. He doesn't have any percentage health damage. He doesn't get Hurricane. He doesn't, he's just really bad in sort of 5v5 fights where you're having to hack through a tank and the other person is like a Twitch going off with his ultimate, hitting multiple targets. So that's why it's pretty rough. And you need to get so far ahead early on with the gold, you can kill people before you ever even get to that team fight potential, right? Or where if a team fight does start off, you immediately delete somebody right away and turn it into a 4v5. So that's the problem with Mana Muse. It's like, yes, it does look cheap, but it's only cheap once it's stacked. It's actually a very bad value in the early game because you don't need the mana and you just don't get a lot of AD. You don't get attack speed with him. You don't get lifesteal and you don't get crit. And like the on hit doesn't, like, it's nice, but because you're not getting Hurricane, it's not going to scale. You're not going to be able to apply it to multiple targets as easily. So that's why Infinity Edge is so strong, because if you get Infinity Edge, then you could do something like a Storm Razor, potentially second, which is the highest win rate second item. It's also the highest win rate first item, but not by that much, by a little bit. But once you get Infinity Edge, you can get Storm Razor second, and then that's going to give you additional AD. You're going to have the extra crit, the 25% extra crit, and you're going to get that Energized Burst damage. So Infinity Edge is just so nice because it scales so well with a lot of other crit items out there, either Rapid Fire Cannon or one of the other Zeal items or Storm Razor or anything like that. So it just has way better scaling. Bloodthirster does allow you to take more extended trades, and it does give you the survivability of the lifesteal plus the shield. So that is really nice. But the Muramana, I'm just not with it. It does have a nice win rate to some extent, but it's just, you're kind of conceding the early game with Draven to have a better power spike on 2 or 3 items in the mid game. But I think if you're doing that, you just need to be playing another champion, right? Just play something else that does scale at the mid game. Play something like Kai'Sa, right? Where you're going to get Gensu's, which can double proc the Muramana, and you're going to get Hurricane, which can spread out those Muramana procs to multiple targets, right? Or play, if you want to try a funky champion, maybe try Twitch with Muramana, just because he can proc it on multiple people with his ult. He can proc it with Hurricane. So I think there's just a lot better champions that have Gensu's or Hurricane or something else, where it's going to be able to proc on multiple targets. But for Draven, for someone who needs to snowball so hard early on, for someone who's always single target focused, it just seems a little weak. So I know that there are some pro players that do it and challenger players that do it, and you can have a good win rate with it, but I just feel like most of the time in solo queue, if you're trying to hard carry 1v9, you need to be able to snowball early, and I just think that Infinity Edge or Bloodthirster are going to put you in a better position to do that. Okay, so that's my case for Draven. Please don't get tier on Draven. I think there are better options right now, although it's not like it's impossible to win if you do that. You're just kind of handing control of the game over to your teammates, whereas when you're playing Draven, you need to really take control early on. That's the main reason you would play him in the first place, in my opinion. Okay, Ezreal is someone else who just historically just kind of can always find a way to be strong in the meta, right? And sort of similar to Draven, he is very single target based later on, and that can hurt you in the mid game if you don't get ahead. He does have a super high delta, basically a 10 delta, but he's just sort of a jack of all trades, right? If you're not sure if your support's going to peel for you, or you're just not sure how the game's going to go, if your support's going to roam around a lot, or just what they're going to play, I think Ezreal is a great choice. He can farm from so far back. He, in theory, should be very safe. He has a lot of utility in his kit. You can go Iceborne Gauntlet, which can help your team kite out if the enemy team has a lot of melee. That can be really useful. He can do really high burst damage if you go for something like a Trinity build. So he is relatively weak in the early game. If you do hit everything, you can do a decent amount of burst damage, right? If you hit your W and then you E in auto attack Q, you can do a decent amount of burst, right, in the early game. But extended trades are somewhat tricky with him. A lot of what this comes down to is how often you hit your Qs. If you're constantly hitting Qs, if you're constantly poking people out, he can feel completely dominant. This is why he does get played in pro a lot, is that he is so versatile. He can have that burst damage if you do get a gank in the bottom lane. But he can also play on the weak side if they want to camp top side. If your jungler wants to camp top or wants to camp middle, then you are in a decent position to be able to play around that, because you can farm so easily and you can kind of function decently on 2 items, right? Once you get your Muramana stacked up, and once you get your Trinity Force or whatever, he can be pretty strong. Now, kind of like Draven, you are going to be really weak. If you go for tier, which you have to do with Ezreal, you are pretty much conceding the laning phase most of the time. Right now, in this meta, it is very heavy push with Caitlyn, Ashe, things like that. So you can get punished really hard for not being able to, pressure people in the lane. But you can still win with him. He's still going to be good in most metas. He is versatile. You can go Trinity, you can go Muramana, you can go Death's Dance, Blade of the Red King. In the past, before they nerfed it, you could even go double tier items or some AP items. So they have nerfed a little bit of his versatility, but he is still strong. He is a safe champion. He can get defensive items with the Iceborne Gauntlet. You can't even take things like Ninja Tabby. So he does have a lot of game. He's one of the better champs against assassins or heavy dive comps, which can be pretty good. So versatile champ, brings a lot to the table, very heavily skill shot reliant, but can be very good, very rewarding, especially in solo queue where you just don't know what your support's going to do. And he can just fit into a bunch of different comps and a bunch of different playstyles. Okay, Kai'Sa's the last one that I'll mention here. Now, you got to be a little careful with Ezreal and Kai'Sa in general just because they can get played in pro quite a bit. And Ezreal is almost always the most popular solo queue champ just because he's fun to play and he is pretty versatile. So Ezreal does have a 35% presence, so you got to be aware of that. Draven, I think, had a lower presence in general. Yeah, Draven only has a 7%, so that's one thing that makes him very versatile, and he almost never gets played in pro. Occasionally. Sometimes he's getting played these days, but in general, he has a lower presence in pro than some of these other champs. But Kai'Sa, like I mentioned earlier, really versatile, right? Right now, she is getting the tier, the Muramana into Gensu's. That is kind of a slow start. You do need to be careful with that. She does have pretty decent wave clear, and she can leverage that mana early on with kind of Q spam and W spam to put out a little bit of poke. So she can leverage the mana, not quite as well as Ezreal, but she can at least make use of it in the early game. But she does do a lot of AoE teamfight damage. She is relatively short range, but if you can position and stay safe, she can do a lot of damage because she can get not only the Muramana, but she gets the Gensu and the Hurricane to go along with it a lot of the time. And she has her passive, which gets applied multiple times with the Gensu, with the Hurricane. So the Muramana procs with the passive procs just allows her to do a tremendous amount of team fight damage. If you can stay safe, if you can position and stay in range, she can do a lot. And she can take out tanks really well also because she has that percentage-based damage built into her kit. She can reposition with her E and go invisible. It's difficult to keep track of. She can evade, point-click abilities. She obviously has her ultimate for outplay potential as well and for repositioning. So if you get used to her, if you are really proficient at positioning, at using those cooldowns, that E, leveraging the invisibility, leveraging your ultimate for extra positioning, she can do a ton of damage. So she can 1v1 people if she gets the jump on them with the isolated Q, but then she can also put out a ton of damage in team fights with her abilities, with her items. So she's almost always going to be relevant. And she does even have an AP build in some metas, right? So if your team is really heavy on the AD, you can try an AP version. That's been nerfed quite a bit, but you can still do something like a Nashor's if you want to somewhere in her build, or maybe even a Deathcap or a Zanya's. So she does have a lot of different potential build paths out there. And the final little bit that I'll mention, and I know that we're running up against time here, I do really want to try to get this to under a minute. So I do talk about supports a lot, so check out the channel. I do tier list every patch for supports, but I'm just going to blow through them really quickly here. I do think that Bard is one of the best one-tricks out there, and these shouldn't surprise anybody. Bard, Thresh, and Rakan are kind of obvious, but Bard does have multiple build paths. You can go Athenes with him if you want to. I still like the Deadman's. It does make him a bit more durable, does give him a bit more of ability to roam around. He doesn't scale super well with AP, so you're not losing out on as much of an opportunity cost if you choose not to go Athenes or not to go something like an Ardent Sensor, because his E and his R have no AP ratios, and the Q and the W are pretty anemic. So you can go for that utility. You can go for that survivability with Deadman's if you want to. And then he can also rush his Shurelya's and leverage that really well early on. That's something that higher level supports are really using a lot more, and I've been talking about this for a very long time since they reworked Shurelya's earlier on in the season. It's super cheap. It's only $20.50 to buy. And then that speed is just so nice. It brings so much utility. So whenever you hit your ultimate with Bard, you can pop the Shurelya's, allow your team to reposition, and really leverage that advantage that you're going to get. So you can get the stuns, so they're going to be in a position to chase people down if they flash. It's just a fantastic item. And it works really well with a lot of bruisers too. If you have a Hecarim on your team, or an Olaf, or just someone else that can use that, or Darius, Garen, someone who can leverage that movement speed, Shurelya's is going to be so fantastic. And it's great for kiting out those champions too. If they have the Olaf, if you have a Hecarim running at you, sometimes Shurelya's can allow your team to spread out and reposition and make a better play. So once again, the fact that he doesn't need AP really allows him to get some of those utility items a bit more, right? And he has kind of the sustaining lane with his W. He has the mana regen with the chimes, so you don't have to worry about getting fairy charms as much early on. If you do want to go for a dead man's pretty early in your build, and you do want to go for relic shield, he can put out a surprising amount of damage early on with the meeps, with the potential Q stun. He can do a lot. You have a nice ranged engage with your ultimate on a pretty low cooldown. It's very difficult to get away from that. Yes, it doesn't do damage, but realistically, if you hit that on someone, there's usually a way you can position to get close to a wall or to get close to stunning them on a minion or another player. So it just brings a lot to the table and has a lot of utility too. Not only can it be used as an initiate, but it can stop towers from hitting people. You can stop different ultimates with it. If Zed just ulted your AD carry, you can use it to save your AD carry. You can save people from Karthus ults, Fizz Fishes. There's a lot of different situations where that ult can come in real clutch. And then you can even save towers from like Shelly charges and things like that, the Rift Herald. So there's just a lot of different ways you can play him, a lot of different ways you can build him. He obviously roams really well with his E. You can also bring in the jungler, from sneaking angles with your E. So he just does a lot. He has a lot of different capabilities. He doesn't really have like super weak matchups. Morgana is a little iffy just because she can black shield your ult, but you can just hold on to it and force her to black shield earlier with your Q or with your slows that you have on your auto attacks. So there's just a ton of different ways you can play him. And he's just super versatile and super useful in a lot of different situations. Thresh is another one where you get very heavily rewarded. I know we're over an hour, but we'll go through as fast as we can. Where you can use him just in a bunch of different situations. His hook has the capability of, you can either go in or you can just use it for a light piece of CC. And it's on a really low cooldown, right? If you're landing that hook consistently in team fights and you have a lot of CDR, it can get down to like a 3 or 4 second cooldown. So you can constantly reapply it just for the CC, even if you don't go in all the way. It's still a 1.5 second stun, basically, which pulls them a little bit out of position. So and of course you can go in, you can go over walls with it. It does have a lot of the versatility in that sense. And then you have your Flay and your Lantern, which can both be offensive or defensive. The Flay can interrupt, different things people need to channel. It is a displacement, so if someone's trying to jump at you or jump away, Zach's trying to engage on your team, Tristana's trying to jump away, Jarvan's trying to engage on your team, Leona's trying to engage on your team. There's a lot of different situations where flaying people back can completely change the dynamics of a team fight. So it's a fantastic ability if used correctly, but especially that backwards flay with how fast you have to do it and how you have to position your mouths to be able to pull off that kind of unintuitive, flay over your shoulder is just really weird, and you have to get used to it, and there's a lot of different ways you can mess it up. And then the Lantern, of course, has so many different uses as well. You can use it defensively, obviously, to pull people away from tough situations, but you can also use it offensively to pull in the jungler or to pull in someone else to reposition. If you flash flay ult or you take a hook over a wall and throw a Lantern to somebody to get them to follow up. So there is the potential for a lot of outplays with him, but you do have to be careful in the sense that, sometimes your team is not on the same page. And if they're not, if you take a hook over a wall and no one clicks that Lantern, you just might die. So you do have to be very, very careful. And he can be frustrating, especially in lower elo brackets where people just won't leverage the strengths in his kit. So you do have to be careful with that. But overall, he is going to be one of the stronger one-trick champs if you get proficient, if you communicate well with your team, and if you're making good decisions, you will be rewarded. Then Rakan is the last one that I'll mention here. He's just super versatile as well. Like a lot of the other supports, he does have really hard engage. If you notice that Bard, Thresh, and Rakan all have great engage, but they get a lot of selection in how they engage, and they can deal with it if their team doesn't follow up that well, right? If no one follows up on your Bard ult, at least you're not going to die most of the time, right? You're ranged, you can stun them with the Q. You're not going to be punished as hard if you're out of position, right? You can get out of sticky situations with your E. You can go through walls, and you're going to be getting, some survivability, Relic Shield, and then sometimes building health with Shirelius and Redemption, or building Deadmans. So you're not punished as hard for your roams, for your wards, for your engages. The same is true with Thresh, right? You don't have to take that hook. You land the hook, situation looks kind of dicey, looks like your team may not follow up, you can just use it for the CC. You can use it for harassment if you want to. The same is true with Rakan. You can go in with your W, no one wants to follow up, or the situation just starts going south. Maybe the jungler rolls up out of a bush or something like that. You can usually E back out, so he can go in and he can get out. You know, Thresh can go in if he wants to, but he doesn't have to. Same thing with Bard. He can go in if he wants to, but he doesn't have to. So I think that's what differentiates the engage these three champions bring to the table versus someone like a Nautilus or someone like a Leona, who more likely, or like Alistar, who once you go in, you're not getting back out most of the time, right? You're fully committed, so they're just not as versatile. And Thresh, you know, a final note about Thresh as well is he's really versatile with his items, right? He can go Shurelya's, he can go Gargoyles if you want to be the primary engage. He can go Redemption or Locket if you want better teamfight potential. So there's just a lot of different items you can build on him, kind of like Bard, and that circles around to Rakan as well. Just super versatile. You can go for the Zeeks early on to give you a bit of extra survivability, to add a little bit of an extra slow to your kit, which is really nice when you're running around with your ult trying to tag multiple people. It gives your AD carry or whomever you decide to link up with some extra damage as well. So Zeeks is where most people want to be, but you can do Shurelya's on him as well. You can do a Redemption pretty early. You can even go for an Athene's. He scales super well with AP. He's one of the best scaling supports that I have on the list, just because he has such great AP ratios. You can do Ardent Sensors. You can very comfortably do a Zeeks plus an Ardent build to give some additional scaling to your Vayne and your Twitch or whoever's really far ahead. So he can go in, he can get out, he can comfortably CC a lot of people. There's a very high probability that if you want to CC somebody with Rakan, you're going to get him, right? Because you're really fast, you have your W to gap close, and so it's just really difficult to get away. Even if they flash, you can just run at them first with your R, wait on the flash, and then W to catch up to them. So it makes your engages very, very high probability of success. You know, with Bard, if it's an Ezreal, they can dash out of it, or they can flash out of it. If they're, you know, a Lucian or a Vayne, they can, you know, get out of it. But with Rakan, later on, when you have that ult and you have your Swifties, it's extremely difficult for them to get away. So, anyways, I do think that Rakan does have that going for him. Now, the knock against Rakan is his laning phase is notoriously really bad, right? You have almost no damage. Your Q is very anemic in the early game. Your W can very easily be outplayed by a flash or a dash, right? If you don't have your ult to go along with it. So that is something where Bard and Thresh are both going to be able to put out more damage, and they just have a lot more threat between Thresh's hook and his flay, and Bard being able to pin people up against minions or up against a wall for, you know, up to 2 seconds, right, with his bind, and just the damage he can do off of his meeps. I think that both of them are a bit more of a threat in the laning phase than Rakan, so they can posture much more aggressively. So you do have to be careful with Rakan. His laning phase is bad. His personal sustain is okay. Like, he does have that repeatable shield. He does have the Q. He can dodge a lot of hooks himself with his W, with his E. So personally, Rakan is pretty safe from ganks, from skill shots, and he can, you know, take a pretty healthy amount of poke. It's just your offense is pretty weak in the early game. So you gotta be a little bit careful with that. But he does roam really well. He can, you know, like I said, reliably CC multiple people in team fights. Probably the most versatile itemization out there, and he does scale really well. He can engage, he can peel. So just a really solid overall champion. Definitely worth considering for one trick. But anyways, that's going to be it. Hope you enjoyed this. I did try to do this a bit faster. I think the previous one trick video I did was like an hour and a half, so we are trimming it down. But to cover all 5 positions, to cover 15 different champions, does take a little bit of time if you do want to get into the items and, you know, the play style and stuff like that. If it's not just a here's the best, okay, moving on. If you want to give each champion at least a few minutes, it's going to take a while. So anyways, hope you enjoyed this. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did. Come by, check out the stream around midnight Eastern Standard Time on YouTube every night. We'd love to have you. Very friendly, chill community. And I'll see you next time. Have a good day.